On the 23rd of January 1968, an American spy ship named USS Pueblo was on an intelligence mission in the Sea of Japan, disguised as an ocean research vessel. USS Pueblo was treading the international waters when it was intercepted by 2 North Korean submarine chasers and 3 torpedo boats, who asked for the ship's identification. In response, the ship's captain raised the American flag, confident that it would deter the North Koreans. But what happened next shocked the entire world. The North Koreans would seize the US Navy ship with 82 men aboard and then taking it into the North Korean port. If it's left up to the military to force release of the USS Pueblo and her crew, the options are few and highly dangerous. A ship commissioned by the US Navy now belonged to North Korea. The crew was taken hostage and transported to Pyongyang, and as negotiations were underway for the next 11 months, Americans held their breath and watched in disbelief, while the US government got a taste of North Korean diplomacy. Today, 52 years and 11 American presidents later, North Korea still repeatedly violates international laws and engages in activities that would be considered an act of war by most nations on earth. This begs the question why? Why a country with a GDP the size of Jamaica has not only managed to intimidate but threaten and even blackmail the most powerful nation on earth? You might say that the answer is obviously nukes, the ultimate deterrent. But I should remind you that North Korea did not have nukes in 1968. In fact, they did not conduct their first nuclear test until 2006, which means US had decades to neutralize North Korea by either throttling their economy with sanctions, attempting a coup, or an outright invasion. But US didn't, and it's not due to lack of trying. It's because nukes are only a part of the equation which makes North Korea impossible to conquer. And knowing what I know now, I can safely say that the survival of the North Korean regime for this long is not a coincidence, but it's a strategy that they started to implement 60 years ago. It's insidious but effective, and this strategy follows a 3-part formula. And it all starts with part 1, impenetrable defense for people living in North Korea. It's essentially the largest prison on earth, and at the same time, for an invading army, it's built like a fortress. You see, North Korea is a land of mountains separated by deep, narrow valleys, and they have used it to create a massive subterranean network hidden from enemy surveillance and safe from destruction. And they did this in 2 smart ways. If you go through this very recent 300-page document from Pentagon on North Korean military tactics, something peculiar stands out. They call it HARDs, or hardened artillery sites, which include airfields where the fighter jets are parked inside the mountains with the ability to take off on short notice. Rocket system and mortars with elevator shafts that can be raised up like a submarine's periscope and target anything traversing mountains, airborne or otherwise, without being seen, much like the hidden mountain bunkers built all over Switzerland. There is an estimated 8,000 to 15,000 underground facilities. There's underground Air Force hangars and runways that cut through mountains, artillery pieces shielded in caves. Another South Korean defense white paper mentions that back in 1971, Kim Il-sung had ordered a tunnel building campaign, proclaiming one tunnel can be more powerful and effective than 10 atomic bombs put together. And he even boasted that he turned North Korea into a hedgehog, so it cannot be attacked from the outside. And as a result, North Korea has some of the deepest and longest tunnels ever built. And proof of this can be seen in the tunnels that run through the border and end up in South Korea, which were found by South Korean army decades after they were built. 3 tunnels were found in 1970s, one in 1990, but the Defense Ministry admits there may be 20 in all. This tunnel, for example, runs 250 feet deep and stretches 400 meters past the DMZ. It was built to launch a surprise attack on the South Korean capital with the ability to dispatch up to 30,000 troops an hour. And some of these tunnels even have enough space to move tanks underground. This North Korean defector was a senior intelligence official within the military. He says Pyongyang's tunnels digging lasted decades. If war breaks out, he says infantry units will be sent into the tunnels wearing South Korean and US military uniforms. According to Davey Maxwell, a retired army colonel who served in Korea, there are thousands of these tunnels and shelters throughout North Korea. This means that if attacked from outside, North Korea will have the advantage of countless tunnels and bunkers they have built throughout the country, safe from most missiles and bombs dropped by fighter jets or fired from the sea. And all this infrastructure is backed by the fourth largest military in the world, with 30% of the North Korean population actively serving in reserve or in a paramilitary. Now all this might sound a little confusing, because how does a country that has already declared bankruptcy and has its economy sanctioned into oblivion pay for all this? And that brings us to part 2, Masters of Negotiation. North Korean regime's only goal is to stay in power, and with their survival depending on it. Leaders of the Kim family have mastered the art of negotiation. They know how to use every bit of leverage they have, and their primary weapon is the perception of irrationality. People outside North Korea genuinely think that they are crazy. This is deliberate and fruitful. Every couple of years, North Korea is in the news. We hear the supreme leader promising to engulf Washington in a sea of inferno and to rain fire to the likes of which the US has never seen before. News headlines tells us that the Korean peninsula is on the brink of war, and when tensions are sufficiently high, negotiations are back on the table. These theatrics are followed by a ransom, usually in the form of eased sanctions, and in a year or two, the story repeats itself all over again. Even the slightest possibility of denuclearizing North Korea is so appealing that it compels the West to repeatedly engage. Here is a list of provocations and failed negotiations since 1990. But let's not be mistaken here. North Korea needs hard currency. And just by looking at the effort they put into evading these sanctions, we can safely say that these sanctions do have an effect, just not the desired effect. Which brings us to part 3, the power of propaganda. You see, sanctions are a tool to isolate an economy. And when these sanctions are imposed on a country, they are meant to serve a very specific purpose, which is to make life harder for its citizens by pushing inflation through the roof. And when that happens, people are likely to protest and put pressure on the government to modify its behavior. But the truth is that the North Korea is not a democracy, and its propaganda can offset almost any such challenge. Kim's regime controls the media so completely that even the most humiliating defeat, whether it's economic or on the battlefield, could be presented as a spectacular triumph over greedy US imperialists. Only a handful of elites know the bitter truth. But if the regime falls, these elites are unlikely to survive and would no doubt be killed, which leaves no possibility that the North Korean regime will be overthrown externally. But instead, the fall of North Korea will be brought upon by a creeping sense of cynicism, because what's even more powerful than propaganda is reality. In the words of Michael Malaise, the author of Dear Reader, it's very easy to convince a captive nation that they are healthy and happy. It is almost impossible to convince a person that they have more food on the plate this year than they had the year before. North Korea has been isolated for decades, and the system works for now, but sooner or later, it will fall apart. But the only way that happens is from within. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel for more captivating updates.